So you may have seen headlines about type 2 diabetes being caused by red meat. And you've got doctors like Dr. Arlo on social media saying that it increases red meat, that is, increases your risk of type 2 diabetes by 62%.
Oh my God!
And of course, all the things are there, Lee. There's misinterpretation of the studies. There's scary figures, which when you look at the actual raw data are not scary at all. So I think we'll go through the tweet line by line and just look at how ridiculous it is.
So, Dr. Arlo has said, diabetes is the leading cause of amputations, kidney failure, and blindness worldwide. So if you think about what type 2 diabetes is, it's chronic elevated blood glucose. I can't think of a better way than to achieve that by consuming carbohydrates, which break down to sugars, often glucose. Studies on excessive red meat intake, and I eat red meat but I don't make up data, have shown 62% increase in insulin resistance.
Don't make me laugh. Ha ha.
He started on type 2 diabetes, and he's just conflating type 2 diabetes with insulin resistance, which you can't really measure. He's also talking about excessive red meat intake. I eat red meat, but I don't make up data. No, you don't make up data, but you misinterpret data, which is what we're going to go through.
One such study was a prospective study that used food logs to confirm consumption and had 5.4 million person years of follow-up that showed. So super reliable, as always with these studies. How on earth are they going to be able to tell you in detail what they ate over the last year or so and more?
Yes, exactly.
He's used relative risk when it helps him, not absolute risk, which is a 62%, which we'll cover in a minute. And also, he's talked about 5.4 million person years of follow-up. But actually, when we get into the next bit of the post on X, it isn't 5.4 million years. He's looking at quintile 1 compared to Q5, which is about a million in each. So it's only 2 million where we're talking about 62%.
Comparing the highest to the lowest quintiles of intake, you had a 62% higher chance of having type 2 diabetes in those that consumed the most total red meat, 51% increase for processed red meat and 40% for unprocessed red meat. This is quintiles comparison. What do we think of that?
Well, it sounds fancy pants, but it's all smoke and mirrors, because actually when you look at the real figures and the absolute data, what are we talking about? And I'm just going to break it down. If you take every 1,000 people and you look at Q1, which is the lowest intake of red meat, 3 people over that incredible amount of time, over 1 million person years, 3 people got type 2 diabetes. And in quintile 5, which is the excessive red meat intake, and don't forget that isn't red meat as we think of it, Lee. It's things that could be pizza toppings or those sort of things.
It's just bullshit.
It was 5 people out of that million years of follow-up.
Oh, scary.
And that's where you get the 62%. Because the difference between 3 and 5 is 2, and 2 is roughly 60% of 3. It's just there to scare. And when they start doing this, you realise that they know they're on shaky ground in the first place.
Lasagna was part of this so-called red meat in this study, and of course Sean Baker's alluded to this on X. Are you seriously quoting the recent Harvard joke of a study that included lasagna as red meat and failed to control for obesity because the primary researcher claimed red meat causes obesity, thus diabetes, and it doesn't need to be controlled for? For F's sake, man. I can understand his frustration.
Yes, and that study, they went back, I think, and reworded it and did add in obesity, because it was a bit arrogant of them to just say, oh, we know who's going to be obese, so we won't even factor that in.
We also have Ken D. Berry chiming in as well. So he's put, Doc, you must know this study is trash. And to which Dr. Arlo responded, it's not. It's very well designed. I eat red meat, but I don't deny the science. It's just more data.
Stop it. Get some help.
Imagine you were going out to buy a lottery ticket and you could get 1,000, but you only bought 3. And the person next to you bought 5. Would you say, oh, wow, that guy has got so much more chance?
About 62%, I think, no?
It was a 62% chance. A 62% chance increase. Wow.
Next up, we have some sunflower seed drunk birds.
Ever wondered what happens to sunflowers after harvest? Birds often perch on the drooping heads, seemingly taking a nap. But they're not sleeping, they're drunk. Leftover seeds can ferment in the sun, producing alcohol. These tipsy birds become slow and drowsy, sometimes even letting people touch them.
I think the biggest thing it shows is these natural seeds and this natural process of fermentation that all the advocates of eating a high carb diet and those that think that bloating's okay and gas is okay and fermentation and the gas is okay, I think this sort of shows that maybe it isn't.
They do look very lethargic. They're obviously quite drunk there. And of course, we ferment this stuff into gas, methane, aldehydes, and alcohol. I've recently stumbled across another channel from a guy, Justin Richard. His channel's called Insulin Resistant 1. Here is a clip where he is trying to mitigate the blood glucose spike with steel-cut oats by adding a scoop of protein powder.
Let's see if adding protein powder to this oatmeal will help to reduce a blood sugar spike. This is 12 ounces of steel-cut oatmeal, which is the best oatmeal for your blood sugar. And I'm gonna add 24 grams of protein with this whey isolate protein powder. I'm hoping by adding this protein, it's going to help reduce the blood sugar spike. Let's give it a try. All right, it's been a couple of hours since I've had the oatmeal. Before we look at these results today, let's have a look at my past results with 12 ounces of steel-cut oatmeal by itself. I had a blood sugar spike on this one of 32 milligrams. Now let's look at today's results where I added 24 grams of the whey isolate protein. And you can see here the elevation of my blood sugar went up by 31 milligrams. That's only a 1 milligram difference, which is not a big deal at all. I kind of hoped for a better result on this one, but sometimes these things just don't work out like you hope they do. There are so many different variables involved with blood sugar.
Thanks for showing that video because it's a little bit misleading. If you look very carefully, the graph he's using has this normative range up to 110 milligrams per deciliter. But of course, the blood glucose spikes past that up to 142 milligrams per deciliter. But he doesn't flash that up on the screen. He flashes up 32 milligrams per deciliter, which doesn't sound as bad. It's over that range already. So I don't understand this sort of thinking because you can see it in black and white that is spiking his blood glucose. And to me, and I have over 15 years as a diabetes and obesity specialist, I don't want to see those blood glucose excursions going up that high. And what puts them up that high is carbohydrate. The easiest thing to do is not spend hours and hours doing videos about how to make it smaller by adding things, just subtract the glucose. And then you won't have any of those spikes. You'll be under 110 with everything you eat.
This kid is a little bit more clued up. He's at least on the right track.
You can't eat this every day, Leland. Ooh.
Now, next up, we've got Brian Johnson, the guy that wants to defy aging and not die by eating everything that could possibly kill you.
Yes, and I think also missing out on the thing that could possibly save you. And I think it's pretty nailed on that you need protein to retain your muscle, and muscle mass seems to be associated with living longer, and yet this is completely devoid of protein. And when he tweeted it, I think most of the comments actually pointed out, where's the protein? Where's the protein? A very rough estimate I saw is between about 21, 24 grams of protein, 115 to maybe 130 grams of carbs, 25 to 31 grams of fat. And that's just not enough protein. To be honest, I would want to see 50 to 60 grams at least of protein. And that's just to maintain muscle mass, protect yourself from being catabolic.
I sold my company Braintree Venmo for $800 million. I've been spending those millions trying to reduce my speed of aging.
It's a terrible menu. If I sent that out as a meal plan to people, I would be absolutely ashamed of myself.
Now, an important part of this is my diet.
To a lot of lay people, this looks super healthy. He's eating all the superfoods, but of course they're ridden with oxalate, lectins, tannins, phytic acid, fiber, which is also an anti-nutrient. It does block nutrients.
Just the facts.
Oh, I agree. I mean, you're looking at phytates that combine to iron and calcium and zinc, essential minerals. And as you say, he's trying to live longer, but he's doing so many things that won't work, and he will have to supplement. And the lack of fats, essential fats, are needed, precursors for hormone production, for myelin sheaths around the nerves. You need fats, and that's very low on that as well.
Here we have Dr. Arlo, once again, debunking people that know a heck of a lot more than he does.
We have found that the longest living people in the world are those with the highest cholesterols, which is laughable.
Sorry, they found that some of the longest living humans had high cholesterol levels.
That's right. That's what the Sweden study found, for example. The paper just published a year or so ago. What were some of the most consistent themes? They had good glucose control and high cholesterol.
On the far right are non-centenarians. On the left are centenarians. Centenarians are the ones that made it past 100. A cursory look will tell you everything you need to know. Those who died before their 100th birthday had 5 times more heart attacks, 4 times more congestive heart failure, 4 times more peripheral artery disease, 8 times more COPD, the heart failure, the peripheral artery disease, the heart attacks, the strokes, etc. All of that is due to atherosclerosis, so high cholesterol.
See, and as you just saw there, he conflates everything to one particular cause, which is cholesterol. He's criticising Professor Ben Bickman for talking about insulin being causative in so many diseases and problems. And yet in that one glib sentence, he says, all of these people died with atherosclerosis. So high cholesterol. Immediately, you realise that this guy is on a mission.
And he talks about in the autopsies that you find all this cholesterol, which isn't actually that true. I mean, it's around about 1% of the total sort of clogged area. It's not like it's all made of cholesterol. I think that's a lot of what people do picture. It's not like even in vitro that we can just inject cholesterol into an artery and clog it up. It just doesn't work that way.
No, you always have to do damage to the artery to get any formation actually started.
The lower your cholesterol, the more likely you are to have cancer, end-stage COPD, end-stage disease, and the less likely you are to reach 100.
Also, about 25 minutes in, he mentions that the authors rewrote the conclusion.
Good on the authors, because they actually went back and corrected some of the nonsense from their study,
which said high levels of total cholesterol was associated with increased odds of reaching 100 years. But they now say low cholesterol was associated with a reduced likelihood of reaching the age of 100. Now, he thinks that's a win, but it's saying pretty much the same thing. So I found that quite strange as well. He's always going on about you need a cholesterol level to be under 60 milligrams per deciliter.
What?
Now, this study, which he is using of people living from 64 to over 100, when you look at the LDL cholesterol, about the lowest one there is 138 milligrams per deciliter, nearly double what he reckons. So he's actually proving that all these people with high cholesterol, what he calls high, have lived to 64 and beyond, and maybe up to 100. So he needs to look at the studies, because it's a great study which I will be using to show that high cholesterol does make people live longer. All these people have got to a very fine old age, and it's in that study. And if people want to see my research, I've started a Substack where every single time we do a video together, I will put a link in the description and you can see how I arrived at everything I arrived at.
Yeah, we hope you've enjoyed. Join us next Monday for another episode of Mainstream Madness. And Stephen.